So I do think the key issue here is to kind of split the platforms from the data. But obviously, you know, Holochain is very much in that foray too. And I really like the kind of pragmatic approach of like, let's not get lost in all of these like token stuff. That's not the key issue here. We want to build great apps. So it's a very pragmatic approach that I really like. And then I guess Neighbourhoods, well, I found Neighbourhoods thanks to Moritz. And it just makes a lot of sense, the whole approach.
Like you raised, I think you brought up a couple of interesting points. Web3 architectures, or at least architectures like Neighbourhoods, allow the splitting of sorts between, you could say, splitting off the actual tech tools and the data that drives algorithms. And I think that's an interesting portal or an opportunity that's thrown up for us. Simultaneously, you're working in an environment where there is no single snapshot of the truth, and that just goes everything against, you know, what algorithm curation depends on, is that central snapshot. And so I think that, to me, outlines this landscape of more distributed architectures within Holochain and Neighbourhoods, and you could say even in Web3. And while some aspects are strengths, there's others which are actually weaknesses, because you don't have that snapshot. And someone who's trying to drive curation, you know, then has this question of, how do I do it without the snapshot or this dashboard? And all I'll say is, you know, the more I think about it, the more I realize this landscape is actually different. It's actually, you know, the shift is pretty deep down in the stack. And I don't mean just the technological stack. I think just in the way we've approached what curation is, how we aggregate, like who drives that, engagement, whether that even needs to be driven in you know, certain social situations, or what the factors for driving engagement are. And so I think that, to me, serves as a very interesting conversation and could be the landing point of what we discussed today.
Yeah, for sure. I guess you know, that's how we had that before. We had the Web 1, where you had a bunch of very niche forums. Instead of, you know, every social interaction happened on either Twitter or Facebook, you had like a forum for people who were a lot into model airplanes and people who shared your values. And in those forums, like when they're fairly small, you don't really need that much curation at all. You certainly don't need algorithmic curation. And I guess you made the point as well, within, you know, if you were within a group of your friends, it would be weird if you had some sort of like curation mechanism that like highlighted your post above my post when it's just a bunch of friends. But I get the bigger the context, the more you need some sort of curation mechanism. And that depends on kind of how big these neighborhoods ends up being. I think you mentioned that you could see some neighborhoods approaching hundreds of thousands of users and maybe the millions. And that's where, you know, in those situations, I think just having no curation is not feasible. And already for me, like if you look at something like Discord, that's a social environment with no real curation. And I have like 20 plus channels, and each channel, or 20 plus servers, and each server has 20 plus channels. And if there's a message in each of those channels per day, on average, that's 40,000 words a day to parse through if you want to read everything. So there needs to be some sort of filter for what's relevant and what's not relevant. And that doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, like classic top-down AI collaborative filtering model. As you mentioned, it could be some sort of some other mechanism, but there has to be some mechanism. And I think it's interesting to start to think more in terms of like social creation, which is how it works in the meet world, where like you know, I have a bunch of friends and they recommend stuff to me because they know me and they know my values and they know what's important to me. And kind of try to digitize that in some way, where, you know, I have certain people that I've built up reputation with or that I trust. And I might trust you a lot on like distributed systems, and I might trust my my brother a lot when it comes to keeping his word, because I've known him for a long time. And if you have that some digitized some way, you could probably recommend content or filter content based on this kind of reputation graph in some way. And it doesn't have to be this, top-down approach. It could just be what other people are in this neighborhood that you already trust on certain topics or something like that.
Yeah. Thank you.